name is Jacob, and I am Norse Pagan. And today I want to continue the series exploring Norse Pagan symbols. And today we're going to explore probably the most popular and well-known Norse Pagan symbol out there, and that is the Mjölnir. Now, this actually coincides really great because I just got done doing all my research for Thor's Week. And so I have all those videos out. You should be able to check them out now. And I actually thought about making this part of Thor's Week, but I was like, oh man, these 3 videos are already going to be a lot. And then sure enough, I ended up wanting to make this video and it seemed like it made sense. And why not continue the Thor series a little bit longer and talk about Mjölnir? So to kind of give you the blueprint of how I'm going to travel throughout this series, very similar to how I do most of my videos, I'm going to start with the hard evidence and what we know, and then move into kind of what this symbol has become and what it means to me and what I think it means in a modern pagan context. So, of course, I do want to start with the source material of the Poetic and Prose Edda. I think looking into the mythology is one of the best things we can do right away in any kind of research into Norse religion or just Norse mythology in general. So starting with the Poetic and Prose Edda is kind of a must. As I am finding in now my later research into the Wisdom of Odin and the content I'm looking into now, a lot of content isn't coming from the Poetic Edda. Most of it is coming from the Prose Edda. You do get a few mentionings of Mjölnir and Thor's hammer a little bit in the Poetic Edda. A little bit during, the Thor's wedding dress story, it gets brought up because obviously it gets stolen, but you don't really get much from that as far as like a modern practitioner's perspective or what that means for us in the modern age, except it is mentioned in the Poetic Edda. Most of the stories we have that are at least pertaining to maybe more of the information we need to know come from the Prose Edda. So you have both the story of its formation and creation within the Prose Edda, and then you also have some interesting applications of Thor's hammer outside of just smashing the heads of the nearest giant. So let's go ahead and move right into the creation of Thor's hammer, because it's the beginning. So this is the story of the creation of Draupnir for Odin, Golembursti for Freyr, and of course Mjölnir for Thor. There's a lot of mischief involved, so it's the dwarves Brock and Eitri, which you kind of see in like God of War kind of shows them a little bit, as far as like a video game, a modern reference, but they're creating these objects and Loki is basically trying to stop them from creating them, or at least cause them, to create them incorrectly. He fails with the first 2 with Draupnir and Golembursti, but he does succeed when he bites one of the dwarves in the eye during the creation of Mjölnir, and is actually smaller than expected. It was originally supposed to be a larger hammer, but it was created to be a smaller one. And then they give the gifts away. When they come to Thor, they say, then he gave Thor and the hammer and said he would be able to strike as heavily as he liked, whatever the target, and the hammer would not fail. And if he threw it at something, it would never miss and never fly so far that would not find its way back to his hand. And if he liked, it was so small that it could be kept inside his shirt. But there was this defect in it, and the end of the handle was rather short. Their decision was the hammer was the best of all the precious things and provided the greatest defense against the frost giants. We get to kind of see a little bit because, when I broke down Marvel's Thor versus, a mythological Thor, in Marvel's Thor, you see the whole, whoever wields this hammer is, good, blah, 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 blah. This is nowhere in the Prose Edda. There's nothing really saying that no one else can lift the hammer. I mean, obviously it was created by 2 dwarves and obviously carried by the 2 dwarves. So we don't really see that where no one else can wield Mjölnir, but we do see that it is a mighty weapon and one of the most powerful weapons ever made. In that creation, you get to see that, yes, it slays giants. That's what a lot of the stories talk about if it is brought up. But the interesting thing, which will come into play later into the modern practice, is there's several instances where Thor's hammer Mjölnir is used as a blessing object, which, again, is really only prevalent in the Prose Edda from what I can tell. Gylfaginning, in discussing Thor, it mentions his objects. One of them is his hammer Mjölnir, well known to fight frost giants and mountain giants when it is raised aloft, and that is not to be wondered at. It has smashed many a skull for their fathers and kinsmen. So here in Gylfaginning, right after the death of Balder and the funeral pyre that is made for him, it is mentioned, very briefly, then Thor stood by and consecrated the pyre with Mjölnir. Okay, so yeah, he consecrated it. We'll dive into that more later, but he basically blessed the fire for Balder. So there is actually one more item that mentions blessing, and that is the tale of Utgard or Loki. When Thor and Loki eat with the family and he kills his goats and resurrects them the next day, the way he resurrects them is with the hammer and with Mjölnir, and it talks about how he blessed the skins, and that's what recreated the goats. So there's a little bit of magic behind it. It's not just a powerful weapon. There seems to be more behind Mjölnir as a symbol. But that's basically what we have from the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda in a nutshell. So now I want to move over to the archaeological evidence. So this was actually a lot harder than I thought it would be to find. At least in written source material, there wasn't a lot written about Mjölnirs found in graves. Usually my go-to sources, we call them Vikings because this is a huge archaeological book, has tons of reference in it. It doesn't even mention Mjölnirs at all, except briefly when it talks about Thor. And none of the books I actually have in my collection mention Mjölnir artifacts, which I thought was quite strange because I do know they're quite prevalent and it's not like they're incredibly rare. And upon researching online, I was able to find out that about 1,000 or more Mjölnirs have been found, dating all the way back from the 8th century all the way up through the 11th century. What I was able to find through various online sources is it seems like there are about 1,000 or more Mjölnirs that have been dug up through various graves and treasure holds across England and Scandinavia. Through my research, I have found that about 10% of archaeological evidence of Mjölnirs have been found through treasure troves and other such means. Only about 10% of them actually came from graves. They also had a varying range of uniqueness. So I'm going to put up pictures here so you can see them. So some were quite simple and some were quite ornate. So with certain things, we haven't found too much evidence of them or too many sources of them. And it seems like with 1,000 or more examples of Mjölnirs, this is quite a common thing to dig up. This wasn't something that was just for kings or just for one group of people. It seemed to be widespread, at least from the variations of Mjölnirs that have been found. Especially since some of them, 10% of them being found in graves and being buried with people, so they definitely had some form of significance to that person. So just like in my Thor's Week video, I discussed how there is a depiction of the story of Thor fishing out the Midgard serpent, and in that story and in that carving is him wielding that hammer. So you can see that hammer, and we also see it in the Altuna Stone, a very similar depiction of a figure wielding a hammer. We can also see in the Eyrarland Statue a figure that is presumed to be Thor holding what looks to be a hammer. So really what we can learn from both the evidence of Thor's hammer Mjölnir being wielded by Thor within the stories and within carvings is that Mjölnir definitely existed. Which, you know, of course we can say that, but not everything in Norse mythos and Norse paganism we can say so definitively. Is that there are a lot of things that are cross-referencing each other, that Thor's hammer was an important symbol within pre-Christian Scandinavian and Germanic societies. And it was also an important symbol moving through into the writing of the Prose Edda. And then even in today, we see its significance quite a lot. It seems like Thor's hammer is something that the pre-Christian Scandinavian peoples really honored, really venerated, and really respected, and were well recording them. They were also making them and personally wearing them. They were engraving them onto stones. They were telling stories about it. So it was important in the past, and it's important now. And we can't say that about everything, which is truly amazing. I mean, if you go up to any person on the street and ask them what they know about Norse mythology, they probably can tell you Thor's hammer. They may not be able to say Mjölnir, but they'll say, I'll tell you Thor's hammer is an important part of it. And it's probably one of the most identifiable things when you're out in public and you see someone wearing a Thor's hammer. You're probably going to be like,
how into it are you?
As I have done many times. I mean, usually this is my go-to thing. If I see someone wearing it, the majority of the time it's not because they think it's cool. Now, if they're wearing like a Marvel's version of it, they probably just think it's cool. But if you find someone wearing the Thor's hammer pinned out there, chances are they're probably into it in some form of fashion. So I think it's really cool that this object, one of the few things we know about that connects us to the past that still is so prevalent now, is so fascinating. Now, to bring it back to the blessing, so the two evidence we have of him blessing Baldur's Pyre and using Mjölnir to resurrect his goats, we see this transition in modern Asatru movements for the most part. So more formalized Norse paganism, formalized worship of these deities. I find that the hammer rites or blessing with a hammer is more prevalent. I don't personally do it because it feels more Christian, and I don't know if I take it too seriously, because if you have to look at it, you know, the tale of Utgard or Loki and the tale of him blessing Baldur's funeral pyre come from the prose Edda, which were already later than the poetic Edda and, of course, the Viking Age, and, of course, were written by Snorri Sturluson. And so, you know, it's hard to say. Maybe this is something that was done in the past, is these hammer rites, but to me it is just so Christianized that I don't know if I can take it seriously. Like, several books I have read on heathen rituals, including A Practical Heathen's Guide to Asatru, brings up the hammer rite very often. And trust me, even doing that, I feel wrong, because obviously in Christianity and Catholicism, doing the blessing of the cross is something that is big or prevalent to some degree. So a hammer rite is literally almost like that. You literally start at the top, you go down to the base, you move to the left, move to the right. And that is how a hammer rite blessing something. That just feels too Christian to me. Maybe it is something. Maybe the ancestors did that, but right now to me, that feels more Catholic, and I'm not really into it. And again, it seems like the information we have of where this came from may be very Christianized. But also the theme of hammers being used in rituals is something that pops up quite frequently, I've found, within the Norse Pagan, Heathen, and Asatru communities, is that using a hammer as a ritual device seems to be kind of common. And a lot of altars you see, particularly of Asatru groups, will have a hammer on the altar, especially for public rituals, and they use it in some form of the ritual. And if this is something that kind of calls to you, go for it. And it might connect us a little bit with the past, or at least Icelandic Asatru, because Icelandic Asatru is probably the closest we have to maybe how at least the Icelandic people did it. But again, there's so much disconnect between the past and the present that we're not sure. But once again, we can say with really good certainty that Mjölnir, Thor's hammer, was prevalent in the past, it is prevalent now, and it seems like it's going to continue to be prevalent. It is one of the most recognizable features of a Norse pagan. Most Norse pagans have a Thor's hammer pendant that they wear to signify their beliefs in the old gods. And so that's what I think this is so important for, is that, like I've said several times in this video already, we do not know a lot about the past or the rites and rituals and the daily lives of the practitioners of this belief in the pre-Christian Scandinavian and Germanic times. But we can say with pretty good certainty that Mjölnir played a pretty important role in some aspect. It was either worn by various practitioners of the faith, both of lower, serfdom, a peasantry, a farmer, all the way up to kings and warriors, and that many people were buried with them, and they were sold and traded in a symbol for the Scandinavian countries, at least at that time. We can see in the mythology that Mjölnir plays an important role as Thor's object, as something that is so recognizable, that something is powerful, and that is something that has survived hundreds of years and into now is so important. We can't say that about a lot of things in this faith or in this mythology. So Thor's hammer Mjölnir is so important to us as a faith and a culture. So I think, wear it with pride. I wear mine every single day. I got this from Blutforge or Weirdcore on Instagram. I'll put this up there because everyone asks about it. I get so many questions asking for it, so I'll make sure I leave his information down below. I do recommend getting one that is handcrafted. Getting one that is just mass produced. Made in a mold. Spend a little. It's not even that much more extra money to go to a craftsman on Etsy or just find someone in your local community that blacksmiths and make you a simple Mjölnir. I think it goes a lot to say, this is just cold forged steel, it's kind of raw, and I like that a lot, and I've worn this for a long time for that reason. But yeah, I think that's all I have for this video. If there's another Norse pagan symbol you would like me to explore more, please let me know down below. I know I'm going to be looking into the World Tree coming up next, and I know the Helm of Awe is something that people want to talk about, but if there's more you want to hear about, please let me know down below.